Hi, Fran Seiford here. We're at CHA and we've been demoing with all of our embossing powders and having so much fun, and I thought I better capture for you on a demo what I've been doing that everyone's talking about. So to get started, I've got my pancake griddle and I've got it set at about 300 or a little bit less. I've taken a big craft sheet and I've cut it into a manageable size, about like this, and we're going to place that down on the griddle. And then I want to work on top of a chipboard piece, and these from Clear Scraps are just a wonderful option that give me a good surface to do all of my melting on. And so now I'm going to take the deep impression. This is chunky clear powder, and I'm going to spoon on a first thick layer. I don't need any ink, it's just gravity. Heat's going to come from underneath all the layers and melt that together. And if you have a clear lid, you can put that on top and it'll speed up the melting. Okay, now it's melted to clear and I've got a beautiful surface that I can add any other colors. So let's start with some greens. And now I can just sprinkle, and now these layers will melt very quickly. So now all of these colors are melting together. And you can see the powders go off the edge. It doesn't matter, because ultimately you can see how I retrieved this beautiful little puddle from a previous one. And I like the shape and I love the colors in it. So we're just going to decide where that looks the best. Plop that in, maybe add this little puddle on top, and anything goes. You can, let's see, then let's get a little bit of chunky gold, and these will spread and create a beautiful pattern. So it's just like your own unique recipe here.
Now at this point you could also add glitter or other, or even later on. So you're not limited. You could do mica flakes, fragments, any of those things will work, right?
Yeah, and this is good. If I have some of the glitters, I'll tend to add them a little bit later in the process in case they would overheat. They do pretty good in here, and it just really adds a beautiful little sparkle.
See, big cheer for glitter.
Yeah. So we might put the lid back on just to have it melt a little bit quicker, and a clear one will let you take a peek at it. But let's just watch it melt here, and we'll maybe do a fast forward for you to see how it sinks down in. A really thick puddle needs to connect, so you should let it flatten a little bit to make sure it's connecting. Okay, next I've got a hair pick with multiple prongs, and you could just use a craft knife, but when you get a whole group of them, it's going to melt and keep changing quickly, so it's nice to have the multiple prongs. And you want the one that doesn't have the plastic tips so that it will slide through. Look at this, you can just begin playing in it and finding where you're going to have contrasting colors. And this little puddle may not be melted quite enough, so I won't disturb it just yet. But now you can see how all the swirls and the marbling effect. Here you can see a beautiful contrasty marble there with the reds and blacks and aged silver. So just before I take it off the heat, if I want to stamp into it, I get my stamp inked up and ready. And I usually use a pigment ink. It can sit there and be ready when you're ready to take it off the heat. So one last thing here before we take it off of the griddle. A couple of little stylus tools or craft knives will give you handles here that you can slide your chipboard, and this is, you'll see it's cleaning the edge by sliding it to an empty area of the mat. And now I'm going to get my spatula. I like a flat one. I can lift the edge and the craft sheet doesn't get hot, but it allows me to lift it off, and with it flat on the table, I can now stamp into it. So it's inked, and I'm just going to stamp off the edge, and I can feel it kind of slide into the molten embossing powder a little bit. And I took this one just in my hand, but the block just helps me to press it in. Okay, so sometimes you can release the stamp right away, like that. And if the stamp doesn't release easily, then let it cool, and then it'll pop out whether or not you have any ink on it. Can you see that? Okay, it's still quite warm on the back of the craft sheet, so handle with care at this point, and let it cool a little bit more before you touch it. You don't want any burnt fingers, and molten embossing powder is very hot. So now, once you can touch, you can pull away the little puddles that have come off the edge, and it's like warm wax. It's easy to manipulate. You can use scissors or a craft knife. But another handy tip is simply to hold it back over the pancake griddle and press down to that edge, like just stand it up, and then you can refine an edge even on a rounded piece or on each side of your rectangle. And there you have a very fun little woodsy sort of fern kind of embossed tile, which is still very warm. So there you have it. Okay, so have some fun with your embossing powders. We should have a heading for that.
Yes, and one more thing.
One more thing. Okay, so with what's left on the craft sheet, you can see where here's a beautiful big puddle, and once that cools, I can pop it off. But other areas are real tiny little bits and pieces, and if you like, get some more of the clear and just cover all of those little tiny bits, and this will give you a bigger puddle that is mostly translucent but captures all those interesting little bits of color and shape. And as soon as this melts, we'll take this off and let it cool, and then I'll show you some more of my puddles here. Here's another one that the colors just kind of blended together in a really interesting way, and this one has cooled, so now I can take it off. And you'll find as you melt your embossing powders that the clear and the metallics melt at a faster rate than the opaques, and one type over another gives you a different effect. So it's very fun and a little bit different every time you do it.